Suzanne, just before obviously we started recording, you were mentioning, a young migrant that you're working with who's facing some challenges at the moment. Do you just want to, tell us a bit more about that?
Well, absolutely. So he's a 22-year-old. He's Somalian. He arrived here, granted leave to remain, but in the middle of his exams, and was literally that day thrown out of the government hostel. And so 22-year-old young man, no family here other than an aunt who's overcrowded and can't take him, literally thrown onto the streets with bags. And, how on earth does someone keep it together? Well, he did, the most remarkable young person. But, when you think of the insurmountable journey that somebody's been through to get to that point, and then, we talk about the hostile environment in the context of Windrush, but actually, how hostile was that, an act of the state, to that mild-mannered young man with nowhere to go?
How did we get here? So, how do we get to this place where we've become so anti the other, and just almost to the point of, it's to proudly say as a country that we will create a hostile environment for somebody who's in such dire need. I don't know if anyone's got any insight into, what happened, because it just seems so inhumane to most people.
I think about this quite a lot, and it can be hard to think about because there's not a huge amount of joy in what comes out. I think we're at a low point in trust amongst each other for who's in power, for who represents and leads us, and that cuts across a number of issues, not just refugee and migration issues, and trust of newcomers, which is really an entirely emotional thing. It drives a lot of powerful decision making, and I question myself sometimes, and I think, have I really reached the end of my naivety? When are the government going to run out of political capital in being tough on migration? We have a leadership runoff at the moment in the Conservative Party, where the new chapter to verify your credentials for leadership of the party is how tough are you going to be on migration, and we also have a government that believes, and I think it does genuinely believe in some quarters, that sending a small number of people to Rwanda who've been seeking safety at the cost of, some would say, up to £1 billion to achieve that on a regular basis is the morally right thing to do because it disrupts trafficking rings. We've almost got to a point where the emotion of the situation and the emotion of the complexity of the situation has overtaken all reason. And I think you see that at a government level, but you also see that interpersonally as well. Then, just to be slightly contrary, you do see up and down the UK groups of normal people, regular people from all walks of life, being incredibly hospitable and kind. We can't lose sight of the fact that by this time next year, there will probably be around 150,000 Ukrainian refugees here, most of whom will have been supported, welcomed and housed and sponsored by everyday British citizens in parts of the UK that previously actually haven't done a lot when it comes to welcoming refugees to Britain. There's a lot to that. I'm sure we'll talk about that. That's good and bad. But it's interesting. It's not all one story. It's complex. But I think the lack of trust that we have between us and we have in people who represent us is driving a lot of the fear and a lot of the emotion.